Warning: the following content may not be suitable to all audiences. Listener discretion is advised. When we arrived at the port, our medical officer, Don Fleckhanger, yelled for us to move it. We hopped out of the flatbed truck and hurried towards the shore. The screaming, crying, and roaring flames got ever so louder. When we got to the shore, all I could do was stand there, frozen by shock. One of the ships closest to the shore was tipped over on the sandy beach with a gaping hole on the side of the hull, where the Japanese fighters' pilots crashed into. I looked left to see lifeless bodies of sailors, marines, and civilians washing up. Some of them lay still in the sand, staining that yellowish color into a dark red. Pieces of body parts floated in the blood-stained water. People were trying to wake up their loved ones, and after realizing they were gone, they mourned over their bodies. People who were hurt tried to crawl or hobble their way towards us for aid. One that I couldn't forget even to this day was a man coming out of the water and crawling on the sandy beach with one of his legs missing. You could see his entire back was completely burnt to a crisp. Something it closely resembled was overcooked meat with clumps of fresh flesh sticking out the sides of his back, gushing with fresh blood every few seconds. The look in his eyes was bloodshot, as if he were insane. He was screaming at the top of his lungs, saying, "Make it stop!" His arm outstretched towards me, with tears rolling down his face as he made eye contact with me, crawling and screaming in agony until he exhausted all his energy. His eyes rolled to the back of his head, and his face went into the sand. His body laid still. Seeing that, my heart began to race. My hearing began to muffle, being replaced by the ringing in my ears. I started to get tunnel vision. I couldn't breathe. I tried to inhale, but it felt like nothing was coming into my lungs. My knees wouldn't stop shaking. And as soon as I tried to walk, I fell on all fours, clutching my throat. Every sharp breath felt like I was inhaling smoke. I felt somebody grab me from the shirt collar, jolted me, and pulled me up. I looked up and made eye contact. I was still in the daze, but immediately recognized those brown eyes. It was Roland.
Easy now. Look at me. Look at me. Take a deep breath and blow in gently through your nose. 4 seconds in, hold it for 4 seconds, and exhale for 4 seconds. Focus on your breathing.
I did what I was told, and slowly my vision began to focus. My heartbeat calmed down a bit, and my hearing gradually came back.
Are you good? I know it looks really fucking bad. Trust me, I'm panicking too. But we gotta rescue as many people as we can. Come on!
I nodded, and with a deep breath, I ran with Roland towards the crowd. I got to these two people, a woman and a small little girl, who were on their knees in the sand, calling out to a man whose eyes were open and seemingly awake. I looked at his drenched clothes, and from there, it gave me an idea of what happened to him. It was hard trying to pry them off, but I assumed it was the wife and daughter of this man. They were trying so hard to wake him or get him to move with no success. I understood their pain, and I knew they needed to mourn him, but I had to evacuate them from the immediate area. So, with gritted teeth, holding back tears and with full strength, I grabbed them both from the waist and dragged them away from his body. I felt the resistance in both my arms as they tried to loosen my grip, calling out to me, pleading with me to go back. But I ignored them and kept going without saying a word. I got them to the nearby flat truck, where the medics quickly grabbed them as they were still calling out to him and flailing. I looked as they forced him to stay where they were. They begged me again to go back for him. Seeing their faces, I couldn't face them no longer. I just turned around and ran back towards the crowd. We moved the people who were too injured on these things called litters. It was like a stretcher made out of wood and canvas. Good old-fashioned adrenaline made people feel like they were weightless when Roland and I carried them. From there, it was a blur on how many people we moved out and tended to. A blur on how much time had passed. I kept moving, kept pushing, even with the pain telling me to stop. More flat trucks arrived from the surrounding areas that helped everybody get to a safe location. There was a loud metal groaning and creaking sound that rang throughout the port. The sound of the ships finally giving out. They sank fast into the ocean, extinguishing the remaining flames on these ships and creating these big balls of black smoke as if a volcano erupted. I was on the shore seeing it as it happened. I looked back to the people being helped into these trucks. Everybody's traumatized faces were covered in ash, blood, tears, and God knows what. All that was going through my head at the time was, why? Why us? They had no reason to attack us, right? So many thoughts going through my head trying to grasp at a reasonable explanation. I stood on a sandy beach and looked around. It seemed like everybody was safe. All that was left was the corpses laying around. My tense body finally relaxed a little, and all my muscles at once sent a sharp pain up to my head. I had never experienced pain that bad before in my life. It felt like I was getting cramps that were pulsing all around my body. I was trying to yell out towards the people at the flatbed trucks, but due to the pulsating pain, only so much as a whimper came out from my mouth. Everybody was focused on other things. I struggled to stay standing until I tripped on my own footing and fell into the sand. I was fighting the pain alongside the exhaustion. The adrenaline was the only thing keeping me from entirely collapsing. I looked left as I was breathing heavily, and what scared me when I was looking at one of the corpses, it stared right back at me with that cold and motionless gaze on its face. Its doll-like eyes wide open. I looked the other way in disgust to avoid that gaze, and when I looked right, it was that same fucking gaze. For some reason, I just stared back looking into that person's eyes. It was a woman with beautiful blue eyes and brown hair, her mouth covered by her mangled clothing. Still staring, I suddenly heard what sounded like a whisper. My heart skipped a beat a bit. The adrenaline kicked back into high gear again. As I crawled towards her, I called out to her in a breathy voice. But when I reached her, it was clear that she was dead. Her skin was cold to the touch, and the smell. It was strange. It smelled like rotting meat mixed in with a fruit-like fragrance. I suddenly felt more tired than I was before from overexerting myself. I looked into her eyes one last time, feeling a sense of guilt. I stumbled as I tried to get back on my feet. I kept thinking it was a bad dream, that I was going to wake up from it since it seemed like it was all over. But the constant reminder of my aching muscles, bones, and looking down at my trembling hands covered in blood told me all there was that it wasn't a dream. Exhaustion hit me like a freight train as I collapsed on the sandy beach. I rolled over to my back and looked up at that smoke-filled Hawaiian sky, the cool ocean breeze hitting my face. It felt so good that I wanted that moment to last forever, to escape there.
Hey man, you alright?
I'm good, man. Relax. I ain't dead yet. Just really tired is all.
Come on, get your ass up. Here. Have some water. Let me take a look at you.
At the time when I was looking at him, I couldn't comprehend how composed he was. It terrified me a bit to see someone who was human look like he didn't have any empathy or compassion. As if I was staring at a machine. How are you so fucking calm about this, huh? Doesn't this affect you? He immediately stopped what he was doing, and without even blinking, he slowly moved his head up and locked his eyes onto mine, sending a cold shiver down my spine.
Do you remember when I told you about that section housing?
Yeah?
Well, if you remember what I told you, I did the best that I fucking could. But sometimes people died at that section housing, and I had to accept it. Otherwise, if I let their deaths eat me up, how could I help other people who needed me? And even still, no matter how hard I try to help people, they still kept dying. Why the fuck do you think I'm here, huh?
Tears rolled down his face as people nearby looked in his direction. All the pent-up emotions he was holding on to were released, and all I could do was look at him in silence. We suddenly looked over as Fleckhanger and our Admiral pulled in. They got out of this Jeep and started to come over to us. Roland quickly wiped his face with his sleeve and got up to salute. The Admiral told him to be at ease and asked if we were David and Roland. We said yes, and he began praising us on helping so many people get to safety.
Gentlemen, good work today. Fleckinger here said you were his best men.
Roland and I looked at each other in confusion.
Oh, you think you guys working those long hours in the sick bay went unnoticed? Not to mention all the injured people who wanted to thank you for saving them. Anyways, look, let's cut to the chase. Let's head over here to the Jeep and get a bit of privacy.
Roland helped me up, and we headed over to this roofless Jeep, which looked uncomfortable, being made of what looked like entirely metal, even the seats.
We were thinking about having a special force called the paratroopers. They're PJs for short. We need medics like you guys to go into the thick and help the soldiers, kind of like what you were doing today. After today, we're looking at joining the war. No question about that. No more standing on the sidelines, boys. This is war no matter how you look at it.
But, sir, we're just corpsemen. We just tend to the sick and injured behind the front lines. We were barely taught how to shoot a gun.
That's why you're going to be trained properly. How to parachute jump, fire a gun, the whole 9 yards. The sooner, the better. We need soldiers to win this war that's happening out there. And a medic who can fight and survive is a valuable asset. So, what do you say?
Roland turned back and made eye contact with me. I nodded, and then Roland looked back to our Admiral.
We'll do it.
Good. Expect to start training when Congress declares war. When that happens, you'll take a cargo plane and you'll be stationed at Fort Benning with all the other recruits who volunteered or got drafted in the Army. Even though, yes, you are both E6 in the Navy, you'll technically be sergeants at the Army base for the time being. While you receive your additional training to become better fighters, you'll help the combat medics class, preparing them for what's ahead. And who knows, you might even deploy with them if shit hits the fan. But we need you two for a special mission. Strictly classified for you two. Do you understand? And if you're wondering about race or skin color, I don't give a shit about that. Whether people like it or not, we're all in the same boat. You guys are good, and I want you guys to become the best of the best to make these Jap bastards pay. Because this shit will not stand. As you were.
He saluted and got into the Jeep and took off, leaving us very confused, but at the same time, with a mixture of excitement.
What the hell was that about?
I don't know. But a special force, huh? Just us two for now?
Looks like it. You nervous?
Yeah.
Yes, on arrival. Roland, David, get your vessel ready for Breton. We need your help.
You heard the man, Roland. Let's go.
Hey, you need a little pick-me-up?
Like what? Caffeine? I don't even think espresso's gonna cut it, man.
All right, check it.
Roland dug inside one of his shirt pockets to take out a bottle with pills and shook it. The fuck is that?
The Nazi's cup of coffee. Amphetamines.
Are you crazy? Where did you even get that?
And don't worry about it. I need you to stay awake and alert. At least for a few hours to help take care of the rush. I tested it out myself and everything. Your heart may race a lot, and I don't know your tolerance, so I'm gonna give you a 5 milligram. Like I said, only for a few hours. Here.
Roland opened up the small glass bottle, and out came this small, white, round pill. He extended it out to me while looking out, making sure nobody was looking. I looked down at it, and at first I didn't want to take it. But I was really tired. My eyes felt heavy. I didn't want to let nobody down, and I had to save as many people as I could. So I caved and grabbed the pill from his hand, preparing myself mentally for what was to come, since at that time, I had never tried drugs before. Oh, fuck me. Bottoms up. I swallowed the pill easily, and it had a chalky kind of aftertaste to it.
It'll kick in shortly. I'll keep an eye on you to make sure you're doing all right. Come on. We got a lot of work to do.
Let's do it. We walked inside the tent to see all kinds of people in different states laid on beds and on the floor. There were 3 other medics tending to people. Roland and I quickly separated to tend to others. I saw this woman who was putting pressure on her upper arm. She had a rag where the bicep and tricep were located. She was bleeding profusely and needed stitches. I quickly ran over to the medical chest nearby and grabbed one of the stitch kits. As soon as I grabbed it, that's when the amphetamine kicked in. I felt a quick, sharp pain in my chest. I felt my heart rate go up gradually. I was breathing at a fast pace, but I was hyper-focused on the task at hand. I rushed over to her and quickly started stitching her up with almost perfect precision and proficiency. It made me have confidence. It felt weird, but it felt good to me at the same time. By the time I was done with her, the bleeding had stopped, and all that was left was this red line going across where the cut was. I tended to others the best I could while on the drug. I keep taking more when it wore off. I was hooked. I felt like I could do anything. We worked long in the infirmary for the next 4 days, tending to and patching up people who needed medical aid. Transfusing blood, stitching up wounds, you name it, we did it. We took shifts to keep our focus, but there was times we had to wake up or were called if the person's condition worsened. Those days were hell, especially the first 2 days where we didn't get any sleep at all. Those amphetamines were the only thing that were keeping Roland and I awake. December 11th, 1941 was the day that I remember oh so very well, as it came on the radio while we were working.
A state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
But the United States has declared war on Japan. As a result, the Axis powers also declared war on us as well. With our overall 12 hours of sleep for the past 4 days, our commanding officer came into the infirmary tent and told us it was time. We had to get the most rest we could for our training. It was 8 p.m. when we got out of the infirmary, where Roland and I sluggishly walked towards these large tents that they set up as temporary barracks. We entered and completely collapsed onto some nearby beds, clothes and boots still on. The lack of sleep finally caught up to us. I didn't fight the weight of my eyelids shutting over my eyes. I was thankful to get some proper rest and accepted the black void. As my eyes finally closed, everything around me slowly became quiet. Time passed and I could hear someone humming a tune with the sound of metal needles clacking. I struggled to open my eyes, but when I did, the surrounding area was familiar to me. I was laying on a twin-sized bed against the wall to the left side of the room. Looking down towards my feet was an open window as the wind was blowing the white curtains. I looked over to my right, and to my surprise, it was my stepmother, and her favorite wooden rocking chair with her long flowery dress, knitting as she always had. I looked up at her, mouth agape, seeing that gleaming smile from ear to ear, her soothing, cheerful hum, with her brunette hair flowing through the wind, just how I remembered. I felt tears well up from my eyes. I fought them back along with the strong, choking sensation in my throat. My lips trembled as I was looking at her. My stepmother was the only one who made the world feel like it wasn't so bad. Even when she was tired from working outside, doing chores and even taking a few beatings sometimes from my father, she would always make time for me, making me food, playing games with me, teaching me. She's part of the reason for who I am today and why I even chose to chase down medicine. Ever since that day, she noticed my gaze and looked down. Her eyes met mine, still showing that gleaming smile I miss so much.
Oh, finally awake, I see.
Mom.
Everything is going to be okay.
The sound of a trumpet woke me from a deep sleep. My eyes shot wide open, and I immediately jumped out of bed and looked around. I saw Roland half asleep out of bed, trying to also comprehend what was going on. I looked towards the direction of where the entrance of the tent was, and the Admiral stood there with a small trumpet in hand. It was time, he said, and told us to pack our stuff quickly so he could take us to the airfield. Roland and I grabbed the little stuff we had in the tent, and the Admiral took us back to the tanny to get the rest of our stuff. It was strange going back, seeing how it was the only ship still standing. When we climbed aboard, papers and other miscellaneous items were all around the ship. They made the entire ship into one big infirmary, hearing the groans and pains of people echo across the metal halls of the ship. We headed towards our sleeping quarters, where our green duffel bags were. I pulled the small little chain for our light bulb on the ceiling, making a small hum. The room was also in disarray. Below the bunk beds were our individual bags. We quickly grabbed them and started to head back outside, as the constant sound of groaning and moans of pain was starting to get to me. We put our bags in the back of the Jeep and hopped in. The ride to the airfield was serious, as no one was speaking a word. Only the sound of the engine and creaky suspension of the Jeep. It was our last time here before we had to go to this new place. We arrived at the nearby airfield where there was this enormous cargo plane. The Admiral wished us good luck and we got inside. It was called the Douglas Skytrain D-48. It kind of looked like those commercial airline airplanes you can see nowadays. But my God, was it loud. There was crates, vehicles, and other supplies in the plane that were strapped down. I was impressed that they could fit so much in this thing. We buckled in on one of the seats nearby and I looked out of the window next to me. I felt a little bit nervous since I had never rode in a plane before at that time. About 20 minutes in, the cargo door of the plane slowly closed with a metal whirring sound. When it finally closed, we felt the plane slowly move straight for about half a mile, then making a wide turn, before stopping on what seemed like a long stretch of runway. After a little bit, it started to move and began to pick up speed, the roar of the engines getting louder and louder as we accelerated, until we felt the plane shift upwards, pushing our backs against our seats. I saw looking out the window the ground getting farther away. The plane leveled out, and I saw Pearl Harbor for the last time, seeing the sun creeping over the horizon. A lot of things were going through my mind, but then my train of thought was broken by Roland's question.
I'm not gonna see my wife and kids anytime soon. Will I?
I looked at him, his head down and his eyes never blinking as if he were deep in thought. I guess the realization that we were in this for the long haul now, until we win this war, had hit him. I wasn't the best person to cheer people up, so the only thing that I thought was okay at the moment was extending my hand out to him and saying, "I got your back, brother." His eyes looked at my hand, then up to me. He straightened himself and grasped my hand.
And I got your back too, brother.
I like to think that day solidified our friendship. No, our bond even more. I wanted to protect him, as he were my own family. I don't know if it was the events of that day or everything leading up to that moment, but he was somebody I didn't want to lose. Not now or ever. We let go of each other's hands, and I went back to looking out the window again in silence. Seeing my reflection in the glass, my stubble was coming out, since I hadn't shaved in a while, and small bags were forming below my eyes. I looked a little more rugged compared to before, with my clean-shaven face and a gleam to my eyes. I couldn't put my finger on what it was that made me seem a little bit different now. Still tired, I started to doze off, remembering those words again.
Everything is going to be okay.